Good morning. It's good to see all of you at chapel this morning. A lovely day that the Lord has made. I'm June Staley. I thank Tim Ritchie Martin for helping us on tech and Nan Erbaugh for the piano music. Thank you, Nan. This morning, it's a privilege for us to hear from Esther Hamer. Esther has lived a life of service and a life of following the call. She has chosen a passage from Matthew chapter 4. One day, as Jesus was walking along the shore by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. We're going to sing together this morning from your red hymnal, number 248. We'll sing the first two verses. Many of you already know Esther. She lives in K-Wing. She graduated from Manchester College in 1950 and went on to nursing school at Western Reserve in Ohio. But I think her dream of being a nurse started even before that. Would you like to tell us about how you decided to be a nurse?
Yes, I am Esther Reinhardt. That was my maiden name before I was married. My last name now is Hamer. I was born in Hagerstown, Indiana, about 16 miles west of Richmond, Indiana, where currently the Church of the Brethren Bethany Theological Seminary is located. Hagerstown was a very small town, but was well known because it was the location of the Perfect Circle piston ring factory. The company manufactured all the piston rings that went into the race cars that raced in the Indianapolis 500 every year on Memorial Day. When my parents went to visit people who were ill in the hospital, they often took me with them. I liked what was the custom for nurses to wear white starchy uniforms and white caps. It was not a very good reason, but I liked these nurses in white uniforms and white caps. I thought, this is what I want to do. I went to become a nurse. When I was a student at Manchester College, I had a dual major, biology, because I knew that would be a requirement to enter a school of nursing. And my other major was music, because I was a very good pianist, and I also played the violin in the string orchestra and in the Manchester Symphony Orchestra. At the time I graduated from Manchester College, now Manchester University, there were only 3 schools of nursing in the United States that if you already had a bachelor's degree from a college or university, the one would need to go to a school of nursing for 3 years. These 3 schools of nursing were Johns Hopkins School of Nursing in Maryland, Columbia University School of Nursing in New York, and the Western Reserve School of Nursing in Cleveland, Ohio. My parents drove me around to visit all 3 of these schools of nursing, and Western Reserve in Cleveland, I think my parents were delighted when I chose that school, because they would not have to drive so far to come and visit me. After I graduated from Manchester College and I went to the Western Reserve College, if one did not have a bachelor's degree from a college, one would have had to go to a school of nursing for 4 years to become a nurse. But it wasn't until I was in the School of Nursing at Western Reserve University in Cleveland that I learned that John Hamer, who had also graduated from Manchester College, who would later become my husband, was a student in the School of Medicine at Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. We started dating, and just after John graduated from the School of Medicine, John and I were married. John left Cleveland, Ohio, and went into a rotating internship in Indianapolis, Indiana. I still had 3 months in the School of Nursing in Cleveland before I could graduate from the School of Nursing. So we had a commuter marriage for 3 months. John in Indianapolis and I in Cleveland for 3 years, or for 3 months. As an honor student, I made the schedules out, and I would decide who would get weekends off. And it so happened that I would get every other weekend off, and then I would take the train and go from Cleveland to Indianapolis. Then, after I moved to Indianapolis, I worked at Riley Children's Hospital, This was during the polio epidemic, and I took care of children who had the viral disease polio, children who lived in iron lungs because they could not breathe on their own, and they were placed in these iron lungs that breathed for them. So on the other side of these on the inside of these iron lungs, nurses would put their hands and arms through these soft plastic holes to take care of these children. All of this was occurring when the United States was at war with the country of Vietnam. And according to United States policy, as soon as a physician would complete a rotating internship, these students would be drafted to go in the United States Army to fight against the country of Vietnam. So my husband would have been drafted to go to Vietnam. But John, who was a pacifist, refused to go and fight in Vietnam. John went before his draft board and told them he would not go to Vietnam. Instead, he would go to another country and be a physician caring for poor people. So the officials of the Church of the Brethren worked back and forth with John's draft board, and it was decided that John would be sent to Nigeria, to the northeast part of Nigeria, to work at Lassa Hospital. While we were living and working at Lassa Hospital, our two daughters, Harriet and Krista, attended a private boarding school in Jos, Nigeria, which was 500 miles away from where we worked in Lassa. And they had a month's vacation during the Christmas season, and they would come back to live with us in Lassa. And then in the month of June, we would go into Jos and spend a month in there with them. Of course, John and I, being married, I would also go to Nigeria, John to work as a physician and I to work as a nurse. We did this for 16 years with two-year furloughs. We also left Nigeria in 1969 to return to the United States. John practiced medicine in the United States for 30 years before he retired. His practice was primarily in Fort Wayne. And then we moved to Timbercrest in the year 2008.
Thank you. I think we might have some questions from the audience. Would you tell us a little bit about Lassa fever?
Well, I don't know if you knew Laura Wine or not. Laura Wine was the night supervisor at the Church of the Brethren Bethany Hospital, and she always wanted to go overseas to do nursing overseas. But when they would examine her, it would be discovered that she had had in the past tuberculosis. And they said they would not send her overseas because she had had tuberculosis. But after they tested her for several years, and it didn't seem to be an active case of tuberculosis, they said, well, if you're 65 and you still want to go, we'll let you go. And so that's what she did. And so then she joined us in working at Lassa Hospital. Her work was primarily in the maternity ward, taking care of mothers and new babies, and she loved that work. And then one morning when I went over to visit her, she didn't seem very alert, and I said to John, I think you ought to go by and visit her. And he did. And some people thought, well, she just had the flu or something like that. And John said, no, I don't think so. So they flew her into Jos, Nigeria, where the SIM, that's the Sudan Interior Mission, also had a hospital. And they flew Laura into that hospital where she could get oxygen and other necessary things that would help her breathe and live. And one morning while she was in that hospital, because she had been accustomed to going to church in Lassa, where they sang and preached in the Lassa Margi language, she listened and she said, oh, the music and the singing is in English. And they said, yes, you're here in Jos, where people do speak English. But anyway, the nurse there said, well, the doctor there said he thought, or she thought, she just had a stroke. And John said, no, I don't think so. I think it's something else. I think she has some kind of a viral disease. Well, she eventually died, and John made sure that specimens from her body were sent to the United States. And I don't know if any of you knew Dr. Joe Schechter or not, but Dr. Joe Schechter had these specimens, and specimens were sent down to the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, and also up to the Yale Arbovirus Unit in New York. And while they were testing these various specimens that had been sent to them, one of the lab workers became very ill, and actually he died. But then there was another doctor there, and he said, I think we'll continue to do more testing, and they did. And while they were doing the testing up at Yale Arbovirus Unit, it was there that they said, yes, this is a new viral disease, and it will be called Lassa fever. Now, you might think that the doctor who discovered it, it might have been called Hamer fever or some other doctor fever. But when they name diseases, they always name them from the village or the place where the first index case came from. And so that's the reason it's called Lassa fever.
You worked as a nurse there in Nigeria. You worked as a nurse. What did you do?
She says, what was your job as a nurse in Nigeria?
Well, our house was about a quarter of a mile from Lassa Hospital. And when we first arrived there, there was one nurse there, but they assigned her to move on to another place. So it was just John and myself that worked at Lassa Hospital until we had Laura Wine there also for a short time. And so, being a quarter of a mile away from the hospital, we rode bicycles back and forth to go to work. And so, because at that point we didn't have any Nigerian registered nurses, John and I took call at night back and forth. I mean, one night John would be on call, and the next night I would be on call, and we just went back and forth like that until we got some Nigerian nurses who had gone away to a school of nursing. In Nigeria, they had what they called junior and senior primary schools. And after you had finished a senior primary school, you could go on to another school of your choice, and some would decide they wanted to become a nurse, and they would go on to a school of nursing. Anyway, after we got nurses who had then become what we would now call a registered nurse, but of course they didn't call them that there. But as soon as we got some Nigerian registered nurses, they would take call at night also.
I guess if you're the only nurse in the hospital, you do everything.
Well, as a nurse in the hospital, yes, you did everything. I mean, when we first went over there, John didn't have a lot of experience in surgery, but when we came back after being there for 3 years, and we went to Muncie, John worked with a father and a son, and they said they would let him scrub in with them on all their surgery so that John would learn more surgery, and that's what he did. And so when we went back, yes, I mean, I worked as a nurse for the most part until we got these Nigerian nurses. And then I was often at home because our children then, when they were at home, I would be at home with them. And also, sometimes there would be visitors who would come from the Nigerian government, and they would be guests. And we always had guest houses in Nigeria, and they would stay in these guest houses, but they would come to our home for their meals. We had a cook who cooked all of our meals, and they would come over and eat their meals with us. And if our children were home, they would enjoy talking with whoever these guest people were.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for your life of service.